Hey guys, it's Dib. How's it going? This video is going to be for healers primarily. It's about how you can use logs to evaluate how you're doing. And we're going to look at some outside tools as well. But many of you have probably heard me say that the healing parse does not matter. So then why are we going to look at logs? The healing parse is not that important. Parse is it's based on so many factors that are outside of your control. What the other healers are doing, how many healers did the raid bring along for a given size. The size of the raid matters depending on the healer quite a bit. Other factors are, your healing class, how good is it on a given fight. All kinds of factors can affect how much healing throughput you're going to do in a given fight. And it's not really that all that important overall. Now, if your healing throughput is so low that the other healers are stressed out or you're having to add extra healers, then maybe that's something you're going to want to take a look at as well. But really, it's not about the parse. The most important thing is, did you take steps to make sure that nobody died during the fight? And that's really what the game is. So let's go ahead and take a look at a log that's going to help me illustrate some of this. This log is from a Mythic Mother kill from a few weeks ago. And let's do what most people do. They go right to the rankings. Oh, 99 eye level. Oh, I was top 50 when this was done, but I got pushed out of the top 50 by this point. But, okay. The Holy Paladin Dib has an unbelievable healing parse. Best Holy Paladin, North America, blah, blah, blah. Probably should be in a way better guild than he is, whatever. All this nonsense. And it is nonsense. Like, you cannot look at just a raw throughput thing and be like, yeah, I'm the greatest. And we're going to kind of take a look at why that is here. So to kind of, spoil the whole thing a little bit, we had 19 people show up for raid, and the raid leader asked, does anyone on anybody's friends list want to come to raid? We found a resto druid on someone's friends list who mistakenly thought we were doing 4 mythics for the weekly mythic dungeons and was instead summoned into Mythic Uldir for the first time, having no idea what was going on, not having the best gear or the best grasp of the encounters. So her healing's not great on this fight, through no fault of her own. She was in way over her head, and she helped a little bit, but she also died during this encounter, so she really did not heal for very much. So that's why the other 3 healers have such high numbers. It's because we're almost 3 healing this, essentially. So first thing we can kind of look at in further evaluating how I actually did on this fight. So we can go into WoW Analyzer, copy paste the link from the logs, and this will bring up all the people we can analyze. We're going to analyze Dib, the Holy Paladin, and wait a minute, what's with all these X's? Like, I didn't use my core abilities, I tunneled the tanks, I was inactive for a large portion of the fight, I didn't use my supportive abilities, but I got a 99. Like, what's the deal? And yeah, I mean, this is the actual story of the log, kind of. There are some problems that are not apparent from the throughput. I'm not using my abilities quite on cooldown, especially Bestow Faith. I used Flash of Light while Holy Shock was available. That's never a good move. But I did do other things. My cooldown usage was solid. I used Light of the Martyr sparingly because you should only use it when you're moving, and everything else that you could use when you're moving is on cooldown. Don't tunnel the tanks. 40% direct beacon healing is really high. What you want as a Holy Paladin is to heal everybody else and let the beacon healing transfer, and don't heal the beacon directly because you get more throughput if you're not directly healing the beacon. I used my mana, positioned well. Inactivity. So yeah, non-healing time, over half the time I wasn't healing. That's high, um, even for a holy paladin, because we do not quite like a disc priest, but we do some healing through doing damage. So we're never gonna be all that low. But overall downtime wasn't bad. And really, by the time I get to the third room in the Mythic Mother fight, I'm just DPSing. Like, there's not a whole lot of healing going on once we're all back together and no one's crossing through the door. I avoided overhealing. I was well prepared. Supportive abilities. So, some of this is very valid criticism. I don't know who thinks it's important to use your movement ability on cooldown. Like, maybe I used it sometimes, but not all the time when I felt like I needed to deal with the winds. But really, that's kind of nitpicky to call someone out like, oh, you're not using your movement ability enough. But rule of law usage, that should be higher. Divine Protection is my personal cooldown. I cannot for the life of me understand why I never used it during this fight. That's just awful. I should definitely use it at least twice when I'm going through the barrier myself. So that's a big problem. Lay on Hands I did use once, so that's 100%. Blessing of Sacrifice. This is my external cooldown. Only 40%. That's not great. So it means for this fight I probably only used it one time. And we can look into why that's a problem. And we'll go back to the logs. And then down below they have all kinds of statistics like how much healing did your trinket do and how many procs did you get. You know, this stuff is helpful, but you know, most of the things you're going to see up here in your checklist and suggestions. So I could have cast Judgment 33 times, but I only cast it 26. That's 77% of the time. 85 is recommended. That's average. Oh, I didn't use my trinket as often as I could have. That's important. That's definitely true. Yeah, so you can see rule of law uptime was about half of what it should have been. That's not good. Well, I guess I was average. That's not good though. But yeah, you definitely want to be using the cooldowns that you have at your disposal to heal more effectively. So now we kind of have an idea that, alright, maybe this wasn't such a good, you know, performance despite what this ranking says. So let's go back to analysis. And as I said before, the most important thing you want to look at as a healer is deaths. And this fight is going to show us some good stuff about deaths. Like, the first two deaths are nobody's fault but the people who died. They died to a one-shot mechanic, the Uldir defensive beam. You can't be in the beam. So anyone who dies to a one-shot or even over like a 2 or 3 second period is probably not going to be the healer's fault. So these next 4 people, they died over, 10 to 30 seconds. That's enough time that they should have gotten some healing in there. It's maybe not necessarily the healer's fault, but now you're looking at like, okay, how much healing did they get? What damage did they take? And you can just kind of mouse over. All right, they're taking damage from defense grid, which is unavoidable. And the tank is taking defense grid and melee, both of which are unavoidable damage. So it doesn't look like people were dying to avoidable stuff like up here with the defensive beam. They're just playing the game, doing their thing, and they took more damage than they got in healing. So then you can kind of mouse over who is healing the people who died and who did not. So Sloth got some healing from me. That was the bulk of it. He got a bit from our Resto Druid. Not really from the other healers. The tank gets a bit from me and a bit from our Resto Druid. Maz the Mage gets quite a bit from our Mistweaver and quite a bit from our Resto Druid, but really nothing from me. And our Balance Druid gets quite a bit from, well, really himself, and then the Resto Druid and Mistweaver, and I'm not even on there. So when you kind of have to take the encounter into mind here and realize that you don't get it from the log, but just from, we'll look at the replay in a second. Maz and Metroid are on the other side of the defense grid. You cannot heal through the defense grid. That's why I'm not really healing Maz or Metroid at all. So I'm not going to show up on theirs. And Sloth Dots and Rupal, though, are on my side of the defense grid as they die. So they get a bit of healing. Actually get pretty good healing for the rest of Druid, who wasn't even there. Just had some hots going, I guess. But they're not, you know, the tank's not going to get any direct healing from the rest of Druid or the Mistweaver because they're on the opposite side of the door. So we kind of know what we're looking at here. People died at 351. And we can look at, all right, the 30 seconds or so before they died is the important part. So one of the best things to look at, I think, is the replay. And this is like a video taken by the logs, and it shows a ton of great information. You can see where everybody is. You can see what mechanics are going on in the fight. So here's Mother is in the second room at this point. Some people on the team have crossed over and are dealing with the ads, and we're sending people a few at a time. So we have already, though, we can see our Mistweaver is on the other side, and then we have, there's our Resto Druid. The other Resto Druid is dead, and I'm in here somewhere. I can't even see me yet. But I can highlight myself in the raid frame. You can kind of see where everybody's health is, which is helpful. And you can see what abilities the highlighted person is going to cast and their target. So we can just kind of let this go. You can see I'm casting Flash of Light, Light of Dawn, or Mastery, Holy Shock, Lighted Flash of Light, Judgment. You know, you can see all the abilities that you're casting, and you can see like, oh, kind of stop casting there because there's Purifying Flame. I have to run against it. I'm only using instants like Light of the Martyr, Judgment, Holy Shock. Back to the Flash of Light. And you can see I am alone here with Sloth, Rupal, and Notch. We are not doing well. Rupal's at like 25%. Sloth is at like 40. Notch is at like 50. And you can see right here, I'm casting Flash of Light on Notch. And you didn't see it, it was very quick, but I hit Holy Shock on Sloth to bring him up a bit. So now he's over 50. And I'm hoping that by healing these two, the beacon transfer will be enough for Rupal to get some healing. And right at this point, I hit Healthstone on myself just to top myself off, make sure I don't die. And let's watch the last, 3-4 seconds before everyone dies. I'm moving through the wall. I'm still in the Healthstone though. Like, I didn't do anything for that period of time. And then Flash of Light on Ift. Judgment on Mother, Light of Dawn. So now I'm doing stuff. The rest of this is not as interesting, but you can see there's a gap there, and we barely made it out of the room before it filled up with fire. But that gap that's troublesome. So we can see what I did, and you can also, if you don't find that as helpful, you can look at casts. And the important part is like 350. It's like right around in here. Let's highlight everything, see what's going on. So it looks pretty consistent. Lots of casts are going off. And then we get to this part, and you can see right there, Holy Shock at 346, and then nothing. So in my defense, I was moving at this point, so let's see what I would have had available. I cast Holy Shock. That's on cooldown for 9 seconds. I can't use that before people die at 351. And Flash of Light has no cooldown, but I can't use that while I'm moving. Light of Dawn, that has an instant, but it's 12 seconds, so that becomes available at like 352, 354. So that's not available when people die. Bestow Faith, also 12-second cooldown. That is going to become available again at like 353. So again, not available when people were dying here. So I'd used all my instant abilities. But what I could have done is Light of the Martyr. It's not ideal. You don't want to use it a lot, but if people are going to die, it's not a bad thing to do. The reason why you don't use it that much is you take damage yourself, 50% of what you do in healing. But if I could have topped up the other two people who were going to die with a couple Light of the Martyrs, that would have been a good thing to do. And we can actually look at... Okay, I did use that Hellstone, but I had not used a health potion during the fight. So I did have that available. I could have casted Light of the Martyr twice, used the health potion on myself to top myself back up after losing health, and we might have made it through that. Let's look at casts again. And let's look at kind of what I did in the second room. So not bad. Like, there's not a lot of gaps here. A little bit there. And a little bit in here as well. This, I actually looked up. We could look at this. 220 to 230. I'm kind of letting everything come back. Making sure I have everything up and available for this Avenging Crusader. And everybody here is basically topped up. Like, this is not a period of time where I could have been doing anything, and I want to make sure that all my offensive and defense, or not offensive, offensive and healing abilities are up for my Avenging Crusader, so I can make the most out of that. So that's kind of why that gap is there. Like, I understand that. But if you look through here, kind of, you might be able to notice what's missing. The thing that's missing is Blessing of Protection. Or no, not, I'm sorry, Blessing of Sacrifice. Blessing of Protection is another ability, but don't want to use that on a tank most of the time. So Blessing of Sacrifice reduces damage taken by 30%. And I used it at 110, which is good. On Rupel, the tank who's getting trucked. By this point, I'm probably alone. Or I think she's in trouble, so I use it there. But I never use it again in the second room, and that's a big problem. That 30% damage reduction, especially at the point where I become the only healer in the room, that's going to be something that I need to use. And that could have definitely been the difference between, you know, Rupel dying and not dying. Like, what's her overkill is 11k. That's nothing. So that's kind of the story of the logs. Like, despite this ranking, there's actually a lot of problems in here and a lot of things that I could work on going forward. I also want to take one quick look and show everyone there's a couple types of priority healing, and one of them is low health healing. You can set this wherever you want. You can set it 50%, 35%, you know, whatever. Sometimes people don't ever dip to 35% in a fight, but when they do, obviously those people need to be healed quickly. Make sure they don't die. Make sure they don't get finished off by something small. So you can see total healing done on targets below 35% health, 770k. There's no real standard for like whether or not that's good, but you can kind of look at the healing distribution. Like, let's see what our very excellent Mistweaver does. Low health healing, 530k. So I did more than he did, which I get, like, that's good, I guess. You can kind of see, you know, are your healers prioritizing the low health people properly? Again, it does depend on class to a degree. Like, you're not gonna maybe expect big heals on low health target players from certain classes versus others, but it is something to take a look at. And it could actually be really good for shamans as well, because they get their mastery from people who are lower health, so they definitely want to be prioritizing them. Alright. The other thing I want to look at really quickly before this video becomes too long is another form of priority healing. And this is Vectis Mythic. We're all kind of familiar with Vectis Heroic, and it's basically the same thing in that people with Omega Vector are in danger of dying. It's a big damage taken. It's a lot of healing done. Is people with Omega Vector. You can actually see it there, and these just by mousing over. But another thing you can do, especially if that healing were lower, like if it's not a top 5 ability, what you can do is a query. So you click this little box instead of table. You want to query. You want to look at buffs or debuffs. Only match if the aura is present on the target. And the aura we're interested in is Omega Vector. And here there's 2 different spell IDs for Omega Vector. Just do all matches. It's easier. And we're going to filter it and create a pin. So now this has filtered out only healing done to people who actively have the Omega Vector on them. And you can see, you know, the Holy Paladin, to nobody's surprise, is a bigger spot healer than the Resto Druid. But really, everybody's kind of in the same ballpark here. What you wouldn't want to see is, like, you know, one of the Mistweavers lower than the tank on, you know, a priority healing target. Just because, like, okay, you know, the Resto Druid or the Mistweaver might not be quite as good at dealing with the priority target, but they should still see it, and they should still do what they can. Like, Corlat is doing a good job here. She's got, you know, her rejuve's going, wild growth, tranquility, regrowth is in there. So she's doing her thing, and she's doing a good bit of healing on it. It's just that, you know, paladins are better spot healers, to no one's surprise. But that's another thing you can do, and when you're done, you just click the X to get rid of it. It goes back to all healing done. And that's about it. I mean, rather than just looking at your, you know, whatever your ranking is for a fight, which doesn't really matter, make sure you're looking at the deaths, how they occurred, what you did in the time leading up to the death. Look at what you had available to see what you could have done differently. And try and look at your priority healing. Make sure you're healing priority targets, like low health targets, or people with dangerous debuffs. Alright guys, that's all I have. If you have any questions, feel free. And thank you for watching.